Today's video I'm going to talk about shading, and this is the drawing that I made for this particular video. So this is the drawing. I would try to simplify as much as possible. To be honest, I'm not even sure if this is a beginner's tutorial or advanced learner, but I think regardless of your level, you can still benefit from the tips and tricks that I'm going to share with you. I'm going to be using just this pencil, which is a mechanical pencil. It's a Bic and it's really basic pencil. So one of the things that I notice most beginners do, they always ask what type of pencil do you use, and they always think the pencils are the secret ingredient to improve your drawing, which is not the case. You have to focus on your skills, not the tools. The tools are not important. So these are the only tools that I'm going to be using. So now let's start the drawing. Okay, let's get the proportions first. This is the reference photo that we're going to be using, and yeah, let's get started. So I like to start with the proportions first. I like to start with the circle and divide the face into two. So we're gonna have the center line of the face, which is a vertical line, and horizontal line, which is the brow ridge. And then I will divide the face into equal thirds, from the brow ridge down to the bottom of the nose, from the bottom of the nose down to the bottom of the chin. This is not a proportion video. I'm not going to focus on that much, but I'll just explain because it's very important. Okay, you have to get the proportions right before you even start shading. And one thing, you do not shade at the same time as you draw your proportion. Especially as a beginner, you want to focus on the line art first, then you start shading, but you don't do the both at the same time. It's a very common mistake that I often see, and I used to do that before, but I still do that till now. But now I know exactly what I'm doing. I can draw and shade at the same time, but as a beginner you should not do that. You should not focus on shading at the early stages. You have to get your proportions down and the structure. Anyway, I'm gonna speed things up a little bit to get to the shading part. So once I get the contour shapes, and this is the second thing that I want to talk about, when you get the proportions, focus on the overall shapes. Okay, start with the general, then you go to the specific. That is how you should train your brain to get the proportions right. This is one of the most important things you should be doing when you are a beginner. You always have to focus on the general picture first, then you can break down those major shapes into minor shapes. Okay, so this is what I did here, and as you can see, now I want to start drawing the eyes. So I'm gonna place a straight line right at the center of the face to get the placement of the eyes, and then a few landmarks for the mouth. And what I like to do when I draw the proportion of the mouth, I like to find those dark areas, especially the corners of the mouth and where the lips actually touch. So if you see any dark area, just put down a dot right there or straight line, but do not focus on very soft edges. Soft edges are not going to help you with the proportions. Okay, always find those dark lines, the dark areas that stick out the most. Okay, so this is one of the things that I do to get the proportions. The first area of the face that I like to start with most of the time is the nose, because once I get the nose properly, I can use the nose as a guide to place the eyes and the mouth and so on. So what I like to do when I draw nose is to draw this shape right here to separate the top plane from the bottom plane of the nose. I don't even know how I can show that to you, but this is what I'm talking about. Okay, so this line, this is what I like to look for. I like to separate the top plane from the bottom, and this is the top plane that I'm talking about right here. Okay, so once I draw the nose, I like to add the nostrils, and as I said, look for dark lines. So the nostrils are really dark, but do not add any shading at this stage. Just stick to the line art. Now when I draw the mouth, I like to look for, as I said before, I like to look for dark areas. They really help me get the proportions right. Now I go up and I look for the proportion of the eyes. So this video, as I said, is not about proportions, but what I like to do is I kind of look for the overall shapes. I do not draw any details. Okay, just draw the eyes, and even the eyebrows, I do not draw a specific eyebrow. I just draw the overall shape of the eyebrow. So now we're gonna get into the most important part of the video, which is shadow mapping. Now the light source, as you can see from this video, the light source is at the top. Okay, this is the light source. It's coming from the top, and it's pretty strong because there is a little bit of contrast. So all of this area, okay, is shadows. Like from here at the forehead, you'll see that there is some shadow right there, and that shadow is actually a cast shadow. It's casted from this object, which is her hoodie. So now when you do that, it's gonna actually create some contrast, because right after the shadow you'll see some bright areas, which is light. Here, as you can see, here is also a dark area inside the eye socket, and you most of the time, if the light source is up anywhere at the top of the head, most of the time the eye sockets are going to be in the dark. So I like to find this dark area as well. Include the eyes in the shadows. The eyes are in the shadows most of the time when the light is from the top. So all of this area is going to be in the dark. This place as well. Even the eyebrows, you have to include them because they are part of the darkness. They are naturally dark. This place too is going to be in the dark. But how do you know exactly the placement of the light? Let me zoom in and I'm gonna show you that. Look, this is light here. This is another light here. This is bright. So you have to train your eyes to see the bright side of the reference photo. All of these areas are in the dark. Start with the general shapes of the shadows first. Start with the big shadows, then you can break down those big shadows into specific shadows because there are different types of shadows. Come down here, there is a drop shadow right here at the cheek area. Now this is where things start to be a little bit tricky around the mouth area. So now if you understand the planes of the face, which you should, there is really soft edges right here, and that you have to be very careful with that. Now here there is a really nice plane which I'm gonna talk about maybe in the future. I always said that, but I'm so sorry guys, there is so much going on, but I'm gonna do my best to explain the planes of the head. And by the way, you can watch my previous videos, the videos that I make like 2 years ago, but they are still relevant. Okay, go check them out. I was really a beginner at that time, but it helped me a lot. Okay, you can go and check them. If you like them, please comment down below if I should make another one or not. I like to do when I start shading, as you can see here, I like to draw straight lines. Those lines that you draw, make sure they follow the direction of the light source. Like here now, the light source comes from the top, right? So when you start shading, follow the direction of the light and you make sure your lines are equal. All of this area is in the dark. Now that we know the shadows, where the shadows are, now where is the light? The light is here. These areas here are in the light. Here these planes are turning away from the light source, so they're gonna be progressively darker. So we have the shadows and we have the light. So when I draw, I like to simplify the values. I like to start with only 2 values to create some contrast. Then I add more values the more I draw. As you can see here, I select only 2 values, light and dark. So now later on, I can add 2 more values. 2 values for the light family and 2 values for the shadow family. After you separate those 2 measure values, you can add more values. So like for example, let's say this is in the shadow, right? Now within those shadows, there are shadows that are really dark, and those shadows are called occlusion shadows. So these shadows are basically the darkest darks in all types of shadows. These shadows are far away from the light source. Any area where two objects connect in the shadows, that is where you're going to locate those occlusion shadows. So I like to separate those shadows from normal shadows, and that will make your drawing look much better. One of the ways you can do that is add more pressure to your pencil, or you can actually use a much darker pencil. I go back and forth and try to go a little bit darker the more confident I am. If you want to take your drawing to another level, you can start adding a midtone. Okay, let's say midtones are parts of the light family. The midtones are transition between light and dark. So this can be considered as a midtone. They're halfway between dark and the light, and they are the transition between light and the shadow. Here is a midtone right here, and they get progressively darker. Any transition between light and dark, you will find the midtones right there. The last value, the last shadow that I want you to understand is the core shadow. The core shadow is the best. We don't have core shadows here. I think I explained that in my previous video about shading. So the core shadows, normally they sit around hard edges. They are dramatic transition between light and shadows. So these are the 4 values that I really want you to stick with. Okay guys, so let's wrap things up. Once you have your proportions down and then the structure, and part of the structure is actually to map out your shadows. So once you map out your shadows, especially the measure shadows first, you start shading the measure shadows first, and you group everything in the same place. Don't go too dark. Okay, at the beginning you should not go too dark. You should build your values from the bottom to the top. Okay, it's not like you're going to start from the darkest dark. So now once you separate the shadows, if you can locate some core shadows, then go ahead and do that. From there you can see that your drawing start to be a little bit more realistic. You go back and forth and start refining those shadows. Anyway, so once you do that, you come to the light family and you can add the midtones, and the midtones, as I said, they are really tricky, so you have to know the planes in order to be able to draw the midtones, and the midtones can only make your drawing better or worse, so you have to be very careful with that. But a good contrast is enough to create a realistic looking portrait, so you don't really have to add every single midtones. As I said, you just need four values, two values in the light family and two values in the shadow family. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the highlights, but the highlights, you cannot have them really if you don't have enough midtones. You don't necessarily have to add the highlights, but if you have to add the highlights to make your drawing a little bit more realistic, maybe you should add them on the eye, maybe on the mouth where it's pretty much dark. You go back and forth, you'll find you can add more details on the hoodie. For me, it's not really important, so I don't even shade it. I just shade a little bit, and that is it. And the aim is not to create hyper realistic drawing. The aim is to be able to draw something that is convincing. I hope, guys, this video really helped. If you have watched the video to this point, please support this content by subscribing if you haven't done so, or you give it a like, or you give me some comments down below. If you have any suggestions, guys, I would really appreciate that. And also, if you want to support me even further, you can check out my Patreon. You can support me there. I upload just a video of me drawing for 1 hour, so if you want to just support me there, check me out on Patreon. I really appreciate. Okay, let me know in the comment section what the next video should be about. Yeah, go guys and practice, and I hope you enjoy your time. See you in the next video, guys, and I'm out.